next up, we've got Brent Arslaner, who's the Chief Commercial Officer for Travelaer. Delighted to have Brent with us today, not only because he's got some great things to say, but also because Travelaer are sponsoring this, so thanks very much, Travelaer, for that. Okay, so Travelaer's interesting business. They were very much first movers on bots. I mean, it was a couple of years ago that Facebook Messenger opened up its bot API, and all of a sudden every travel company that we've been reporting about and travel companies that we hadn't been reporting about were launching bots, and bots were going to be the next best thing since sliced bread, if that's not an analog metaphor to use when talking about bots. So Brent here, he's got a pretty good perspective on how the bot landscape has changed over the past couple of years. So Brent, maybe just give us your perspective for somebody that's actually been developing and implementing bots.
Right, yeah, sure. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
You know, when you look back, I think over the last kind of 18 months, we were, I think the first, in fact, provider that actually had a bot go live to be able to sell flights with Arslaner. And you know, I think a lot of the initial buzz and hype was everyone wanted to sell things via their bots. Of course, you know, you naturally want to generate more revenue. I think what we're finding as we start looking closer into the data, that arguably the most valuable use case for bots is really customer service. When you look at the reason that travelers come in and they actually want to communicate with you via a messaging platform, be it Facebook or one of the other leading platforms, typically it's because they have an issue and there's immediacy, meaning they want something solved quickly. And it could be a fairly basic issue of, you know, they want to know what bag size is allowed, they want to find their boarding pass, or they want to check in. But there can also be more complex types of issues, meaning things like disruption. We're currently working with a kind of top 10 airline today, and really what they're focused on is, you know, it's that horrible scenario that occurs where you're sitting at Heathrow, for you probably, and all of a sudden the lights go up and say your flight is 2 hours delayed. Then what? Do you want to queue with everyone else? Do you want to call the 1-800, whoever it is that is going to answer the other line? Or if you could leverage a messaging platform so that when you went in, you could actually get your flight rebooked, so you've got the information about it, and if it's delayed, you might get a meal voucher, you might get access into the lounge so that you can spend some time quietly not waiting with the hordes of other people in queue. Or if your flight was canceled, that you could actually be rebooked, but also have a hotel that's available, as well as a car service, be it Uber, be it just a regular taxi service, whatever that may be. But I think simplifying the experience for clients, especially when things go wrong, and also taking away from the amount of time that customer service agents have to deal with these issues is really, I think, the heart and the crux of today what maybe the most valuable use case is for bots.
Okay, well, the bot as a customer service, you know, just automating the FAQs, natural language processing, artificial intelligence, that's, I would imagine, relatively straightforward. I mean, airlines have coped with disruption offline using desktop. I mean, how complicated is it for a bot to liaise with a passenger who's been disrupted? And how integratable, if that's a word, is the airline back end with what bots? And is this the next stage of where bots are going?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I agree with you that kind of the first, call it the first phase. I think we're at a whatever sports
2.0.
Yes, whatever sports analogy or analogy you want to use. It's a very early stage of the process, and I think FAQs. It's an actually extremely important, and it's not. I guess the point there is doing FAQs right, and it's not just a one-time, constantly adding to the taxonomy, making sure there's always new things. You have new routes, you have new products, you have new ancillaries. There's things that are always changing with the airline, so making sure that the FAQs, instead of it being some static page that nobody actually looks at within a website, that it's evolving as your business evolves. So that's your base. And then I think as you move on from there, being able to integrate deeply into the airline systems is crucial, and it's not easy. I mean, I think that's one of the takes, and there's people that, chatbot, hey, there's plenty of tools. You know, the two of us can go and start working on a chatbot together and build some Q&As, but when you start getting into integrating into DCS systems, integrating into inventory systems, going into GDSs. There's complexity there. And I think a lot of it is building a kind of an API infrastructure so that you can get the right information on a very timely basis. Because especially when there's things like disruption, things are changing quickly. Sometimes all the information isn't available, so you have to make sure that your system can respond quickly and that you've got the hooks into all the right systems.
Okay, so you're talking about sort of like an API layer between the DCS and the chatbot, for the risk of oversimplifying it. I mean, does that API layer exist currently within the airline ecosystem?
Well, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, right? Yeah. I think it depends on when you start looking at the systems that you're interfacing with. Yeah. And that's actually an area that we're investing heavily, is kind of the API and microservices layers, so that if we're having to interface with an Amadeus system versus a Sabre system versus anything else, that we have a lot of the pieces in place and we can just do some minor configuration to be able to enable it.
Okay. You mentioned sort of earlier, the start of the conversation, a lot of the bot conversation does tend to be focused around Facebook Messenger, because that's probably the bot that most of us use, but there are other messaging platforms out there. So I mean, in terms of airlines, are they looking at a sort of multi-channel bot strategy, or are they thinking, well, most of our customers are on Facebook Messenger, so we're focused on that, or most of them are on WhatsApp, so we're focused on that? Are they adopting a sort of multi-bot approach?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, it's a good question. I mean, I think chatbot's even it makes it seem more simple than it is. I think, I think a lot of airlines are looking at a kind of a conversational platform across all these different channels. Omni-channel. Sometimes that's an overused phrase, but if you look at Facebook, obviously, and geographically, in the US, it's extremely popular. And then you look at parts of Europe and Asia, obviously the messaging platforms that are being utilized are very different. So we are absolutely seeing airlines now that are saying, okay, we want to use Twitter. We want, once WhatsApp opens up their APIs to enable it, we want to enable WhatsApp. And we also want the same channel to be able to do chat within our website. So, I mean, I think that is having a point solution honestly doesn't make a lot of sense. And especially as you start talking about interfacing back into the customer service and agent tools. Because at the end of the day, the bot's not going to get everything right. And there needs to be this mechanism where there's times when it needs to escalate to an agent, and you don't want to have 5 different interfaces for all these different messaging platforms. It's going to be a real challenge to manage for the people behind the scenes that actually have to solve the problems that are not easily resolvable from the bot.
Yeah, I mean, we worked with some sort of hotel tech providers that are providing bots, and there is almost a point at which the bot then has to pass it over to a human, because the bot hasn't been programmed yet to be able to respond to it. So we started off with 2 years ago Facebook Messenger, and everybody had a fairly straightforward FAQ bot, and now we're looking at bots that connect into the departure control systems and manage disruption. So it's funny to talk about the next phase of bots when they've only been around for 18 months, but what's the sort of future gazing that you're doing at bots? Where do you think they could go, and where do you think they might go?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two ways to answer that. One, I think from a module perspective, we do see things like selling ancillaries, maybe not necessarily the flight, but if you're when you look at kind of why, the premise behind Travelaer at the beginning, and it was really based on improving the customer experience from the beginning, from kind of inspiration through the actual flight booking, but also through the journey in the middle, which means I'm not quite to the airport, I'm at the airport, I'm at my hotel, I'm all the way home. I do think that messaging, especially in this kind of omnipotent, call it messaging, people are always using these tools, they've got their phone in front of them, that right before you get on a flight, hey, would you like a meal? Oh, by the way, there's discounted Wi-Fi. Oh, you haven't checked in yet, quick, do you want to do that? Oh, by the way, the weather has actually got worse, have you packed properly? There's a lot of I'll call them kind of interesting convenience, travel helper type situations. We talk a lot about managed trip and also tailored trips. So once you're in the journey, being able to help people actually get to their end, their end location seamlessly. So that's one piece. I think the other aspect is when you look at the technology, and we talked a little bit about FAQs already. I think auto-learning, meaning instead of today, a lot of it's pretty manual. We have to train, you go in and you have to train the NLP engine to understand the different vocabulary, the lexicon, the abbreviations. We're getting to a phase where as content changes, the AI systems are getting better at being able to learn as all these different customer cases or all these different messages and communications take place, that I think there is a point in time in the not so distant future where the bot itself will get intelligent without a human having to help train it on a frequent basis. Obviously voice, I mean, when you look at Google Home, you look at Alexa, I mean, I think that everyone knows it's coming, right? It's now as it sits in your home. The chatbot, at the end of the day, these 2 points are going to come together, where I want to be able to talk to a device if I have an issue, if I want to book a flight, if I have a customer service inquiry. So I think you're going to see more voice included into the applications. And I think we touched briefly on, I think, the omni-channel approach.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's fascinating. I mean, as I said, I think bots have been around for 18 months, and now we're talking about have they matured and what's the next phase? And it was great to get your perspective because you were one of the first, as we said, to develop and actually implement. So you know what you're talking about when it comes to bots because you've actually worked with real airlines, dealing with real customers. So Brent from Travelaer, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Okay. I appreciate it.
That was Brent Arslaner from Travelaer, Chief Commercial Officer. More interviews coming up shortly. Thanks for your time.